Hey guys, welcome back to my channel Dr. M Inspires. So if you are an international medical graduate who is dreaming of working in Australia, you know that your first milestone is passing the AMC Part 1 exam. So I've gotten so many requests on to do a video on how to prepare for this exam. So that being said, I did my AMC Part 1 in September 2023. So that's actually been 2 years since I've done it. But the structure of the exam, the resources that you can use, and the method of studying, these will never change. So let's have a chat on how I studied for my exam, and let me give you a few tips to improve your chances to pass this exam. So let's first talk about understanding the exam. I know you actually can feel very overwhelming at the start, especially because if you don't have any clue about this exam. So I know that because I've been there myself. So I've done my own research and asked friends who've done it. Sometimes they say different things, they give different opinions, and you really don't know what to do. Okay. So the first important thing is understanding the exam. So AMC Part 1 exam is a computer-based exam consisting of 150 multiple choice questions. So you get 3.5 hours, and within these 3.5 hours, you have to finish the 150 questions. Okay, it's not easy, but if you practice well, yes, you can do it. Choosing the right resources. When I started studying, what actually felt challenging to me was finding the right resources. Because if you ask 5 different people, they would say 5 different things. And there are so many resources they say that you can use, and that can actually confuse you. So let me tell you what I used, and I felt that was more than enough to prepare for this exam. So, number one, it has to be the AMC handbook for the MCQ. So, still, I would say how many years pass by doesn't matter. This resource should be number one in the list, because what I felt when I went to the exam was that the questions that I got in the exam were similar to the questions that were in the AMC handbook. So, how many years go by? Still, AMC handbook, the MCQ handbook, should be number one. And then number two, there are question banks. So there are so many question banks. My advice is you have to follow just one question bank, and that is sufficient. I followed Amadex, but there are so many other question banks like ASMCQ or M plus X, and so many other question banks. So stick to one question bank, because the purpose of these question banks is actually for you to understand the concept and the basics of the questions that you would get in the exam. So follow one question bank. It doesn't matter which one, but you need to make sure that whatever the answers that they have given in the question banks are actually correct. So please make sure to follow one question bank. So I did Amadex, and that was sufficient for me. Then number three, John Murtagh's General Practice. So that's a very important book, and that has a lot of key information in relation to practicing medicine in Australia. So that is a very important resource. But honestly, speaking about myself, I didn't have a lot of time to read the John Murtagh's General Practice, but there were questions where I referred to this book to find answers. Okay. And then number four, I would say number four would be the recalls and the study groups. So when I say recalls and study groups, like whatever the questions you can gather from the past years are very important before you go for the exam. And then your study group. So it doesn't matter if it's just 2 of you or 3 of you, you should have a consistent study group. But if you're a person who is willing to study by yourself, then it doesn't matter. But if you're a person who is in a study group, you have to have a consistent study group. So don't change study groups. I think it can really confuse you. So stick to one study group, and then come the recalls. So what I felt was these are the resources that were helpful for me. And honestly, I didn't do anything other than this. And I think if you stick to these resources, this would be sufficient. And on top of this, whenever the relevant questions come, you can actually refer to the guidelines, the Australian guidelines. Especially what I felt was like for ONG and pediatrics, and also questions that come in relation to GP, like general practice questions, and then also the questions relevant to ethics and statistics. So you have to do just Google the guidelines for those, because sometimes even in the John Murtaj you might not have these guidelines. So what I did was, some questions where you have to refer to Australian guidelines, you can actually just Google and you get the guideline, and that's the best way to refer to certain questions. So these are the resources that I used, and these were actually sufficient for me to get through the exam. Let's talk about creating a study plan. So before you start creating your study plan, in your head, you should have a rough idea when you're going to do the exam. So I started studying in February that year, and I was aiming to do my exam in August, although I ended up doing it in September because I could not secure a date for August. But initially, my plan was to do the exam in August. If you feel confident, you can book the exam right away, but I didn't do it. I thought I'd take a few months to see how it goes with my studying, because it's been quite a long time since I studied. So I thought I'll just take it slow. Okay, so just like for anything else, consistency is the key. So you have to be consistent. If your end goal is to find a job and move to Australia, you have to be consistent. So, what I mean by consistency is you have to at least spare 2 hours a day for your studies. If you are not working full time, and let's say if you're right out of med school and waiting for house job, you have plenty of time, then you can actually spare more time. But in my case, I was working full time, but I made sure that I will read something every day. So, to start off with, my first go was with the Amadex question bank. So, why I started from the Amadex question bank is because I thought it's actually good for me to get an idea about what kind of questions that I would get in the exam. Like, not the structure, but basically about the concept of the questions. So by this time, I did not have a study group. So I did the Amdex question bank once on my own, read the questions and then the answers hand in hand. And I thought that was really helpful for me to get an idea. So by the end of the first run, I had a study group where 5 of us, including myself, who were actually aiming to do the exam towards the end of that year, we got together and we again started from the Amdex question bank. So that was the second run for me. And while that was going on, like daily, we did discussions for like 2 or 2.5 hours every day. And other times when I did not have discussions, whenever I had time, I started the AMC handbook, the MCQ handbook. And it's a big book, so you actually need a lot of time to read the questions and the answers. So I started the AMC handbook at the same time as well. And for people who have already read the handbook, you know that the answers sometimes can be a little outdated. So then you have to search the guidelines and see what the updated guidelines are. So at this point, I felt that the therapeutic guidelines was also actually helpful. I'm sorry, I could not mention this before, but if you do have access to therapeutic guidelines, then I thought that was actually helpful, because it's pretty straightforward about the assessment, the management, the investigations, and everything. So if you do have access to therapeutic guidelines, I'm really advising you to follow it, because therapeutic guidelines is something that we actually use here in the hospitals when it comes to managing patients. So the Amadex question bank twice, and then the AMC handbook. So I would say by this time, while I was doing the AMC handbook, I felt ready to book the exam, and I think like around April or May, I booked the exam. Actually, I got a date for September. So I felt a little confident, because the second run of the Amadex question bank and then the AMC handbook, and by this time I did actually have an idea about the kind of questions that I would get in the exam. So I think all this kind must have gone up to like June or July. And while I was doing the Amdex question bank, I also made a notebook for myself where I jotted down important points that I would need towards the end of the exam, because obviously I wouldn't have time to go through the question bank again if I want to read something. So at the same time, while I was doing the question bank, I did make a book where I jotted down the important questions and the answers. And I would say that was actually very helpful for me. So by this time, I think it must have been like 2 to 2.5 months close to the exam. So I thought that this was the best time to start with the recalls. So what I actually did was, by this time there was actually a group on Telegram that I came across, just not just myself and my friends, that we came across on Telegram, where they actually discussed recalls every day for like 2 to 2.5 hours. So I thought this was the best way to catch up with the recalls. So my advice is recalls is actually very important for the exam. And if you are able to do questions at least in the past 1 year, that is ideal. But I didn't have time to uh, do questions of past 1 year, but I made sure that I would do at least questions in the past 6 months. So my aim was to cover the recalls of the past 6 months. And by joining this recalls group on Telegram was actually helpful. So because they actually referred to the guidelines and found the answers for the questions. And this discussion group was very helpful. And every day it was like for 2 or 2.5 hours. And whatever I did not understand during the discussion, after the discussion, I would again just go through and read the guidelines and made sure I actually understood it well. Because it was a little challenging, because I was not practicing in Australia then. So like now if I think back, I'm like, why didn't I understand that? But then at that time I was in a different healthcare system, and that actually can be challenging sometimes when it comes to understanding certain answers. So I made time for myself to read up on my own to understand them. So I covered recalls of the past 6 months. And also, I don't know if it's a myth or not, but they say if your exam is in September, read the questions of the in the month of September in the previous year. And I don't know. So I did the questions from the previous year September as well, just to be confident, just to be more confident. What were the challenging subjects for me during preparation for AMC Part 1? Number one is psychiatry, because I've never got any exposure to psychiatry, so understanding psychiatry was a little challenging to me. And then comes ethics, and then statistics. So ethics, when you're in a different healthcare system, I didn't understand. But now I'm working here, so I know how it works. But I was in a different healthcare system then. So because of that, I found the ethics questions a little challenging too. And then the stats. So I honestly didn't put much effort for stats, because it was going to be only just 1 or 2 questions maximum. So I honestly didn't study much for the stats, because those formulas, I found it a little tricky for me to memorize. So I didn't actually focus on stats much. But psychiatry, ethics, and stats were what I felt were a little challenging to me, because ONG pediatrics were actually, these were things that I liked, because I had the exposure back in my home country with ONG peds medicine. So I was actually okay with those subjects, but psychiatry, ethics, and stats were the challenging subjects for me. So let's talk about timing yourself in the exam. So this tip is very important, and for me it was very useful, and I think even you guys should use it too. And I actually have told this to my juniors or friends who are actually getting ready for the exam. I got this from another friend, and that was actually very useful to me. So, timing yourself in the exam is very, very important, because the chance that if you don't time yourself in the exam, the chances that you can miss few questions is very high. So, you have to time yourself in the exam. So, how did I time myself? So, you have 3.5 hours for the exam, and you have 150 questions. So, how I timed myself was, first hour, you have to finish 50 questions. Second hour, you have to finish 50 questions. And in the last 1.5 hours, you have the third 50 questions. And why 1.5 hours for the last 50 questions? So, for some reason, they say that the longest questions you get in the last hour, sorry, the last 50 questions is like the largest questions, and you need a lot of time to read these questions because the stems are so long. I think that's one particular reason why they have said the last 50 questions you should spare 1.5 hours. So that's how I timed. But honestly speaking, for me, I felt my second 50 questions were the long ones compared to the last 50. Like even the last 50, some questions were long, but I felt like the second 50 questions were the longest. But still, I stick to that plan. I did my first 50 questions in the first hour, and then the second 50 questions, somehow I managed to finish within the second hour. And I had 1.5 hours for the rest of the 50 questions. But like I said, because my last 50 questions were not as long as the second 50 questions, I had quite a bit of time left. And the sad thing is, you can't go back to check if you put the right answers, right? So you just keep moving forward. So honestly, I think my last two questions were pretty long. So I was actually even afraid to come out and tell my friends that I had like, I think more than half an hour for the last two questions. So I was a little anxious till my results came because I knew that I finished the questions too fast. So I was a little anxious because I didn't know if I have marked wrong. But somehow I got through. Anyway, so my advice is if you stick to that timing, you won't miss any questions. Plus, you will have enough time to finish off all the questions. Because if you don't know something, you have to keep moving. If you just keep thinking on just one question, sometimes no matter how much you think, you wouldn't know the answer. So you know it. If you know it, you know it. If not, you just have to move on. So that's the importance of sticking to that time so that you will be able to finish all the 150 questions. Let me give you a few tips. So, tip number one, revise common topics. Don't be focused on these uncommon things because this exam is all about common questions. Especially the clinical questions are very common clinical questions where you have to know about the guidelines like the management and how would you investigate, or what is the most important investigation you would do to diagnose this condition. So just focus on the common questions, read on the common topics. Don't spare a lot of time reading the unnecessary rare diseases. Okay. All right, then tip number two, you have to practice under timing. Don't let the exam be the first time that you're going to time and do. Okay, I wouldn't say practice because you wouldn't have another chance. So don't let the exam be the first time you're doing it. So you have to practice under timing. I remember that in the AMC MCQ handbook, there is a trial exam of 150 questions. So I timed and did this trial exam about 2 weeks before my exam because I needed time to find out what wrong I did, like the mistakes I did, and I had to have time to read the answers of those questions as well. So please make sure you practice under timing. So I remember like towards the end, sometimes even from Amadex, I would just take like few random questions and just put on the timer and would do it. Sometimes even if I know the answer, but I wanted to see if I can finish reading the stem and the answers and think of an answer in that given time. So practicing under timing is very important. And then tip number three, please don't let yourself burn out because I know it can be overwhelming. There can be days where you feel really tired, you feel behind, you just feel less motivated. But please make sure you have to stay motivated, get adequate rest and sleep in between. Don't let yourself burn out. And please, if you are in a study group, make sure that each member contributes equally in the study group and that they are very active and motivated. Otherwise, it will not be very easy to keep moving. So make sure that your study partners are equally motivated as you, and whenever you feel less or feel behind, they can motivate you. So it's very important to have a very active, motivated study group as well. If you're preparing for your AMC 1, don't forget this is your first step towards your Australian medical career. There is a long way to go, but stay focused, stay patient, and connect with the right people who can actually motivate you through this journey. And there is also a video where I have talked about my preparation for the AMC clinical if you want to get an idea. And if you like this video, please do not forget to like, share this among your IMG friends, and subscribe to my channel, because I do share a lot of tips and insights from my personal journey here in the Australian healthcare system. So until I see you guys in my next video, take care.